Classroom assessment. First question, explain classroom-based assessment, CBA. CBA involves strategies by teachers to plan and carry out the collection of multiple types of information concerning students' language use, to analyze and interpret it, to provide feedback, and to use this information to help make decisions to enhance teaching and learning. Observable evidence of learning or lack of learning is collected through a variety of methods. For example, observation, portfolio, conferencing, journals, questionnaires, interviews, projects, task sheets, quiz, and tests, and most often embedded in regular instructional activities. In other words, CBA comprises a repertoire of methods and the reflective procedures that teachers and students use for evidence to gauge student learning on an ongoing basis. In this view, teaching is adjusted to meet students' need. In addition, CBA is a contextually bound and socially constructed activity involving different stakeholders in learning. Within the classroom, it is mainly teachers and students working together. That is, for example, teacher or peer and self-assessment. But additional participants can be parents, school administrators, and others in educational context. Within CBA, there is a potential for overlap with psychometrically based large-scale testing. If teachers choose to use such information when interpreting their quiz or test result, but this would only be one source of information among many others, with the later falling into the category of assessment without test. Teachers most often have external criteria standard to meet concerning their students' performance. Ideally, CBA should complement such criteria and the external tests that accompany it. Teacher mediation between these criteria or standards and CBA is a challenge. Now, historical perspectives in CBA. It is just that in general and language education, the focus had been on measurement theory of large-scale testing, and little attention had been paid to CBA. This is partially due to the assumption that large-scale testing qualities also apply to CBA. Now, with the increased attention towards constructivist and sociocultural theories of learning and influence of Vygotsky's work, Zone of Proximal Development, ZPD, where learning takes place through social interaction, the call to expand traditional education and measurement to view CBA as a different paradigm slowly began. Reflection on this direction is clearly articulated by Moose or other scholars. Now, another question, critical issues and topics in CBA. 1. Do we need an umbrella term for assessment internal to classroom? This is the critical point. Let's see. As an awareness of classroom assessment in an activity to support learning growth, we need to call it to become apparent. Various labels and approaches with overlapping characteristics can be found in the literature. This can be perplexing because each of them claims some relationship to classroom, but the question remains which one can serve as a comprehensive or umbrella term. There is no consensus to date because some terms have unique characteristics that may not generalize to all classrooms. So the question may be, do we need an umbrella term or not? It is important to note that here, parallel to the recognition of CBA, there is another discussion taking place in the literature which pits the traditional testing culture against new assessment culture, the later overlapping with CBA, new assessment. Now, another point is reliability and validity for CBA. Do we need to revisit these qualities or not? Question is this. Another issue concerns reliability, validity, and whether these qualities, as they are known to large-scale language testing contexts, are relevant to CBA or not. The purpose of CBA is to support learning and through feedback to help learners understand where they are in their learning and where they need to go and how best to get there. This involves a very local context where teachers know their students and work with them, where student reflection and performance promote and encourage further learning via self or teacher feedback. The assessment characteristics are different than traditional testing. Explain that the main differences between CBA and large-scale tests is context of classroom. The difference between large-scale tests and CBA is context of classroom. Early attempts were made to reconceptualize reliability and validity in CBA, but others, like Brown and Hodson, expressed concerns from measurement viewpoint. They demonstrated how CBA serves learning in that the participants, teacher and students, discuss and interpret the evidence to enhance the progression across the necessary learning phases. They endorsed the concept of reliability and validity as important, but felt revisiting these concepts was due to the conceptualized nature of information generated in classrooms. So we should revisit and revise these concepts, reliability and validity, in CBA. The traditional positivist position on language teaching with the tendency to map the standard psychometric criteria of reliability, validity onto classroom assessment has been called into question here. And the scope of validity has been significantly broadened and taken further by a number of research. The known overlap across CBA and large-scale testing is the need for evidence, but the context and use of this evidence are different. Now, another point, in educational system, what is needed to align internal external to the classroom assessment? As awareness grows concerning different approaches to and different purposes for assessment in educational systems, discussion has turned to the need for an alignment, it means agreement, across CBA and large-scale assessment. Some of them coming points that Coming is the name of person. Coming 2009 points out that educational systems internally are reform their policies concerning student language achievement by ways of setting criteria for a unified system across tests, curricula, and pedagogy. In support of alignment, there are increasing claims that assessment can support learning as well as measure it. Discussion on the benefits of aligning formative and summative assessment is increasing, for example. They can be aligned. Now, we are going to another point about critical issues. Assessment literacy and teacher training. How do we reach a balance between CBA strategies and technical test development strategies? Assessment literacy refers to knowledge, skills, and understanding of assessment principles and practice. This can include classroom assessment strategies, mediation between assessment activities, internal and external to the classroom, and understanding of test development strategies and interpretation of test scores. This is assessment literacy. Then we go to current contributions and research here. What is important here is that explain assessment reform group Assessment Reform Group ARG. It is that of Assessment Reform Group in UK and its ongoing examination of the benefits of what is now labeled as Assessment for Learning, AFL. Assessment for Learning. Gardner provides an in-depth view into the work of the RIA, explaining the processes and internal contexts that have contributed to the research. RIG, or Assessment for, as I said, Assessment Reform Group, considers AIF process beneficial. What are principles of it? This RIF or AFL is part of effective planning, focuses on how students learn, is central to practice, is a key potential skill, is sensitive and constructive, fosters motivation, and so on. These parts are not important in this article. A majority of L2 learners, for example, report CBA within the context of education reform and standard policy as beneficial, for example. So, what are research contributes to CBA? Teacher processes to support learning. One of them is this: teacher processes to support learning. Specific methods employed in CBA, another part. Another area of research that has helped describe CBA pertains to the variety of methods employed by teachers in the instructional context. For example, the complexity of CBA in that teachers have an increasingly wide array of choices in terms of methods to use, and teacher judgments and decision making and contributing factors, another part. These are not important parts. There are some recommendations about how to use it, and conclusion is that therefore assumptions cannot be made by looking at the label of method that it will be a procedure that is supportive of teaching and learning. For example, portfolio have been used in both formative and high-stakes summative assessment situations. Therefore, in order for portfolio use to be classified as CBA to support learning, characteristics concerned with CBA would need to be defined from the outset. So we should define it based on CBA.